Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
Congratulations, Prime Minister Carney, sworn in for the second time today. But now the work really begins, doesn't it? You've got to steer Canada through what you have described as its most significant crisis. Just so we're clear, what's at stake? Is Canada's existence at stake?
No, the existence not at stake. It's the most significant economic crisis. It has an element of a heavy element of security, national security that comes with it. The extent to which we will be cooperating with others on our national security, particularly the United States. So the scale of the crisis is the economic crisis and the fact that the fundamental nature, and my judgment, our judgment, of the global economy is changing.
You said in one of your speeches, Donald Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us.
I said that many times.
You said it many times.
Yeah.
You promised voters that you wouldn't meet President Trump until he respected Canada's sovereignty. There you were in the Oval Office. I'm sure you enjoyed that a lot. With him calling Canada the 51st state to your face. So the question is, why did you meet him?
Well, a couple of things. One, he was expressing a desire. He wasn't calling. He'd shifted from the expectation to a desire for that to happen. He was also coming from a place where he recognized that wasn't going to happen. I made it clear to him in the context. And the other aspect of it was that for a period of time, he wasn't providing the respect to this office, to my predecessor in this office, that it deserved. The President and I have had several conversations prior to that meeting.
Yes.
It was clear that we were going to restart the relationship, discussing as two sovereign nations, and that is what happened.
So do you think that he ever intended to annex Canada?
There's wish and reality. Did he want to? Did it look like an attractive combination to him? Yes. Does he still muse about it? Perhaps. Is it ever going to happen? No, never.
Okay, but you talked very tough during your campaign and you rallied a lot of Canadians behind you. You seem now to be dialing it down a little bit. Was it politically advantageous to you to make Canadians feel that he was coming for Canada?
I recognized very early, I think I recognized very early on, amongst the earliest, that this was a threat. It was a threat to our sovereignty. I was very clear from the start that Canadians wouldn't stand for that. Canadians made it very clear, almost virtually to the individual in terms of the way they voted. They didn't all obviously vote for me, but the stances of other parties shifted towards where I began. And so, but now the question is, can we, it's an open question, can we negotiate that new partnership? It's started, those discussions have started, but they certainly haven't concluded.
And in terms of his desire for some kind of marriage, as he described it, a beautiful marriage with Canada, do you think you can keep that at bay, his desire?
Yes, without question. Look, there's a couple of things that are quite important, and this is true in and of itself. It's also relevant to a negotiation. We can give ourselves far more than the Americans can take away. So yes, they put tariffs on us. Yes, they're causing problems in the auto sector, in the steel, the aluminum sector. They violated the NAFTA Accord and other aspects, and so that has an economic impact on Canada. They could put more tariffs on us. That's always a possibility. Conceptually, I don't think that's going to happen because we're now moving towards a more constructive place. But we have within our own power an ability to grow this economy in ways that will outweigh the negative impact of American tariffs.
We'll come on to...
And so that's important, and I think that's something that the President and the U.S. administration increasingly understand. That's useful for our discussions with them because they know we can wait. Okay. Of course, it's important for Canadians, first and foremost.
Of course. But knowing that the President has a desire for Canada.
Yes.
Part of what you're doing is symbolic, isn't it? You're inviting King Charles to come here to this building to open Parliament. Are you trying to send a message? to the US President?
Well, I think His Majesty coming sends a message first and foremost to Canadians. It is a message of sovereignty, and I think one of the points I've made from the start of when I first became Prime Minister is to emphasize that Canada it's an amazing country, the best country in the world. I'll add for your viewers.
I'd be surprised if you didn't say that.
Exactly, but it is founded on Indigenous peoples. The English and the French, three peoples founded this country in effect. We've come a long way in reconciliation with the Indigenous people. Now we are one of the most diverse societies, and so the point to be made from the history, the lineage, go back to our head of state, but also a reminder of the nature of what Canada is and has become is a very powerful message, first and foremost, to Canadians.
I'm just thinking that it feels a little coincidental. It's nearly 50 years since the Queen came and opened Parliament here. Has it nothing to do with Donald Trump?
No, the desire to reinforce all issues around Canadian sovereignty have been accentuated by the President, what he said. They exist in normal times as well. No, it's not coincidental, but it is also a reaffirming will be a reaffirming moment for Canadians and really a sign of what this country has become.
And Prime Minister, did you ask the King, or was it his idea?
I asked the King. I asked the King when I visited the United Kingdom in March, within days of my becoming Prime Minister the first time.
And he liked the idea?
His Majesty was very receptive, and we're honoured by his visit. It's not the easiest thing to do, to get up and come to Canada.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Although I would like to say to visitors, it is easy to come to Canada. Please do. We're more than welcome. It was our idea, warmly endorsed by His Majesty, and we're very pleased he's coming.
The King, your head of state, of course, has also invited Donald Trump on an unprecedented second state visit. Keir Starmer personally handed him the invitation in the Oval Office. All the while, he was threatening Canada's existence. What did Canadians make of that?
I'll be frank, they weren't impressed by that gesture. Quite simply, given the circumstance. It was at a time when we were being quite clear. Some of us were being quite clear about the issues around sovereignty. I was not yet Prime Minister, but I was being clear on the campaign trail, and it cut across some of those messages.
So do you personally think that a state visit to the UK for President Trump is appropriate, given that backdrop?
Well, that's a judgment for the government of the United Kingdom and the Palace.
But I'm sure you have an opinion on
Well,
that.
you reference... I have opinion on many things, some of which I keep to myself.
I'm inviting you to share it.
That's very kind. You mentioned that it's unprecedented for a second state visit. President Trump is also unprecedented in having an interregnum between becoming president again, so both 45th and 47th president. So there are many unique factors, and I leave the diplomacy to the UK government.
The Oval Office, we talked about Keir Starmer being in there. It was your first big post-election test. It can be a lion's den, can't it? We saw what happened with President Zelensky. But it seemed cordial. He flattered you. But I have to say that you had a face, you pulled a number of faces that launched 1,000 memes across social media.
Okay, I'm unaware.
What was going through your mind while President Trump was talking?
Well, the President was making a variety of very interesting points.
Interesting? What do you mean by interesting?
Well, there are a variety of interesting points. I mean, he started off with respect to developments which were fast-breaking with the Houthis and a potential ceasefire there. It ranged on to a series of other issues, including a mystery announcement, which I found quite riveting.
Yes, he kept you on the edge of your seat, if I remember.
Yeah.
I know that you can't tell us about the substance of what was discussed, but if you could give us a sense of just a flavour of behind closed doors there. Did the President's tone change with you after the press conference?
Yeah, I mean, the President is interested in a very wide range of issues, global issues. We had a long and varied discussion of a number of challenges from Iran, other aspects of the Middle East, Russia, Ukraine developments there, and beyond the Houthi situation with the Houthis. So discussions there. We talked about mutual issues around defense and security, talked about a number of economic issues. We talked about all the progress we are making in Canada to stop cross-border fentanyl and where we could work together on guns and other aspects going across.
So it sounds like you got straight onto it. There was no small talk?
Well, no. The President he, as I say, has many interests, and the conversation will move around. He's fond of analogies, so he will often make analogies that go around. But Is he on top of
the detail?
I would say he's very on top of the essence of a wide range of issues, and that's important. But that's what you're looking for. Is he puts his finger on what's most important. And I've observed this when I used to go to the G20, obviously not as a leader, but as, it doesn't matter. I used to go to the G20 as in my Bank of England role. And an ability to identify, the points of maximum leverage, both in a specific situation, but also in a geopolitical situation.
Is that surprising? I was wondering if there's anything when you had that meeting that caught you off guard or surprised you about him.
Well, I've observed some of this before. I think that what issues surprise? I think elements of the broader Middle East strategy were, sorry, I used the term earlier, but were interesting, and I think quite perceptive, quite effective. Yeah.
I presume you can't tell us any more than that.
I can't. I can't. No.
Fair enough.
No.
Let's talk about the art of the deal, if we may.
Okay.
Keir Starmer befriended Donald Trump. We talked about his time in the Oval Office. He was the first to get an agreement over the line, the big announcement from President Trump. Now even China has some kind of partial deal. Why hasn't Canada got one yet?
Well, by the standards of the Chinese deal, we have a deal. We've had one for a while. I don't view the Chinese deal as progress, but the Americans have already lowered tariffs on Canadian goods. They have a series of tariffs. We probably don't have time to go through, but quite a substantial lowering of tariffs on a number of goods. And they've also uniquely, because we have USMCA, are allowing in a variety of goods now on a tariff-free basis. So that has happened already. So on the context of these broader, quote, deals, we're actually
deals. You sound like you're.
Well, they're like the Chinese situation. Well, no, the Chinese situation is a 90-day pause. It was an 89-day pause now. So that's different than a trade deal, so that's the first point I'd make. So there has been some progress there, but the reality is that the meeting, which was only a week ago, that the President and I had, was the first time we really were sitting down and starting broader discussions. And recall as well that the UK is not, China is not, Europe is not, Canada is the largest client of the United States. We are their largest trading partner. Okay. So that is the big deal. That is the deal that will move things.
Yes.
And there are many factors that will influence it, and we've just started.
But Starmer did get an agreement on steel, aluminium and cars. Wouldn't Canadian businesses in those sectors welcome that?
Well, we don't want an agreement that allows us to ship 100,000 cars to the United States when we ship over 1.5 million cars to the United States. Okay. So we are in a different order of magnitude in terms of integration and scale of the relationship than the United Kingdom, with all due respect. It's a totally different world. Okay. The level of trade with the world's largest economy. We are the largest trading partner of the world's largest economy.
So, Prime Minister, you are to host President Trump and other G7 leaders here in Canada. Last time the President was here in 2018, he stormed off, refusing to sign the agreement and accusing your predecessor of being dishonest and weak. Are you confident he's not going to do that again?
Well, it's going to be a very important G7, given what's happening in the global economy. The early stages of these potential trade deals. Number one, what's happening in Ukraine and beyond. President Zelensky will be at the G7. I invited him. I think what's crucial, and if there's a lesson, if you will, from that G7, but just in general, is to be consistent. Say the same thing in private as you say in public. Say the same thing after the summit as you say during the summit.
Okay, so who was not consistent last time?
Well, I think the President perceived some inconsistencies.
from?
Well, I'm going to be consistent. I will be the same, and I think that's what's necessary in order to get agreements, and that's what he respects.
The other unfairness that President Trump highlights is defence, and he has a point here, doesn't he? Because Canada's contribution to defence as a proportion of GDP has been pitifully low, if you don't mind me saying. You've been free riding on the US for years.
Well, there's a couple of things there. The first is that we have substantially increased our defence spending. We've more than doubled it over the course of the last several years. I have announced a series of major defense initiatives. There's more that's going to happen. And it is part of our discussions with not just the United States, but with the UK and with Europe, how we are going to increase our defense spending. Because in the end, I flip it around is what's necessary to secure our borders, secure the Arctic, and, of course, to support our NATO partners.
But getting to 2% by 2030, which I know is already an improvement on what it was, it feels too little too late given the state of the world, doesn't it?
Well, it's a dynamic situation, let's put it that way.
Okay, so we might expect that to change.
Dynamic means change.
Okay, and given how little Canada has paid in year after year, do you trust President Trump? I mean, he seemed pretty clear in the Oval Office. You know, we support them militarily and we're happy to do that. Do you expect that he would come to your aid militarily if needed?
We have very integrated defense forces. NORAD, which is the defense force for the Arctic, for the ballistic missile defense and other things, is highly integrated. We've just announced a major investment, which is state-of-the-art, over-the-horizon radar in the north, for example. We're moving to 365-day presence, air, land, and sea in the north. We have confidence, full confidence in our defense relationship with the United States, as we do with all NATO partners.
Okay. So you're confident that if you needed them, they would support you?
As they are confident that we would support them if they need us.
Okay. With your tiny military and a lot of broken equipment.
It's not that tiny.
Now, we're talking a lot about defence, of course, because the world's in a precarious place. And one of the things I want to talk to you about is a big hotspot, obviously the war in Ukraine.
Where we are the largest per capita contributor to Ukraine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, but in terms of bringing about peace, President Trump has positioned himself as a key peace broker there between Putin and Zelensky. Do you trust that he's an honest broker in that regard, in representing the interests of Ukraine, Europe and the West?
I do. A straight answer, I do. Let me take an opportunity, though, to salute the work of Prime Minister Starmer and President Macron in forming this coalition of the willing, where Canada is one of few, I should say, Australia's there, New Zealand, non-European members of the coalition of the willing, in creating both a capacity support for Ukraine, creating a pathway to security guarantees, helping to tighten financial sanctions, and providing support for U.S. what have been bilateral or trilateral conversations around peace, coming back and forth, I know, with some volatility. But that is now, those are starting to converge as we sit here today, Thursday being an important day in Istanbul as a part of a process. And if you'll note, and I'm sure you have, the positions of Canada, the UK, all the coalition of the willing, Ukraine, and the United States are converging towards this unconditional 30-day ceasefire demand of Russia. So the President has been helpful, as, very importantly, has the Prime Minister, President of France, other members, including Canada, who I would remind is the largest per capita contributor to Ukraine.
So momentum there from what you're saying. I know that you like to go from the personal to the general pretty quickly, but I'd like to talk to you a little bit about your values as a leader, if I may. You're new to politics, but you have been the ultimate insider. You've been called Davos man. You sort of represent the establishment, rules-based order. A lot of that is in retreat. It's mistrusted by people because they feel like it's failed them. Do you accept any of that?
Well, there's a lot in that question. Has there been a cost of living crisis, including in Canada? Yes. has inequality gone up in a number of countries? Yes, not in Canada actually, following transfers. So inequality has actually flatlined and gone slightly down in Canada over the last several years. Are there challenges with globalization and tilting the vote? Absolutely. I've identified those over time. So there are a series of those issues, and they are real and they translate to people. And people want solutions. Now, the solution that Canadians chose is me. We got more votes than any other party has ever got in Canadian history. We won the majority in 7 provinces. We won far many seats. And the solution that we're looking to is, first and foremost, to build one Canadian economy, a fairer Canadian economy, and to build out trading relationships with reliable partners. So it's not a turn inward strategy that Canadians are embracing.
That's interesting because you did win, obviously. I congratulated you at the beginning. Yeah. Populists are not in power here or in the UK, but they're hard on your heels, as they are in the UK.
They were ahead by 25 percentage points before I ran.
Nothing to see here, please!
So
yes.
I think it's important to recognize, I'm going to stress this point. This country voted for diversity, openness, fairness. That's what we voted for.
But populists are still setting the agenda to an extent, and you ran on a platform of nationalism and border security. I'm just wondering if that's uncomfortable for you as a man of the centre-left.
No. I think you have to deliver. A first responsibility of government is safety. Safety and security, national security, border security, security in people's communities. And look, you can't redistribute what you don't have. You have to grow the economy. There does need to be more focus on growing the economy here. So I ran on that as well. But it's this was a vote, in my judgment. This was a confident country voting. It was voting to reaffirm values. America's a melting pot, we're a mosaic. Healthcare is a big business in the United States. In Canada, it is a right. It is a very different country, and people recognize those differences and voted for those differences. We talked about it earlier with respect to the King. We have 3 founding peoples, but we are a truly multicultural society. This is you look at the cabinet that we swore in today. It is a very different country than many countries, and so there's this affirmation of it.
Right.
Now, I have a responsibility, and my government does, to deliver on the economic side, to deliver with the United States and those other factors, but in the context of, as I say, a confident Canada.
My final question. You've written about the importance of humility in your book.
Yes.
You've mentioned it in many of your speeches, including your press conference this afternoon. What have you learned the hard way in your first couple of weeks as being Prime Minister?
The hard way, first, I would say, I'm going to answer it more generally because I'm not sure I've learned something the hard way in the first couple of weeks. Because we have...
I did say you like to go from the personal to the general.
No, but I mean...
I'm inviting you to just stay with the personal. What's been harder than you expected? It's keeping you modest. This question. Look, there will be lots of mistakes, and I think recognizing them. There's one of the things that people respect is when you recognize mistakes up front. Is there an example?
I was Prime Minister for 9 days, and now I'm Prime Minister literally for not even 9 hours. I've just been reaffirmed. We've got the big things right thus far. But we've got a long way to go. And look, the thing that I take on humility is a couple of things. One is, and the experience of financial crisis, always plan for the worst. So with the United States, we do plan for having no deal. We do plan for trouble in the security relationship. We do plan for the global trading system not being reassembled. That's the way to express it. The second thing on humility is being very clear that you're not going to have all the answers, and so you have to have a true team. And so that cabinet, which you saw sworn in today, has to truly function as a cabinet. It has to be more than the sum of its parts.